What's up, champs? Welcome back to another season of the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Ben Burnett. I have ditched my far more famous and clout-driven besties from the Beat Writer interview series, and I am joined instead by my counterpart, my partner in crime, the one, the only, the talented Mr. E, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, how you doing tonight?
Your humble assistant. I get in the box. You saw me in half. My legs kick. It's a great show.
I forgot to call it a fine night, though. Do you think that's jinxed us?
No, because I think that's an in-season thing anyway. We never know what it's going to be like outside of the season. But any night where hockey is actually happening, when we record on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so it's always that is a fine night.
Okay, great. Sorry, I jumped over you. You take it away here.
Just, a little bit about what we're going to do today and what the idea of our show is. They say that your draft can be lost in the early rounds, but your draft is won in the late rounds. And what we sort of thought we would do is everybody's out there dissecting the top 100, top 150 of the rankings, trying to figure out, who should rank where and how to use those upper picks. What we thought we would do is come in and look at some of the, late rounders, some of the dollar auction type guys, somebody that you can pick up late in your draft, based on both the Fantrax and the Cupful ADPs, and could really give you a nice value for where they are being picked up. And what we're hoping is, especially as, the Keeping Karlsson patron fantasy leagues are getting going, they're going to start drafting. The ultimate patron fantasy leagues.
Yeah, not just the regular one.
That's right. I can't. I was like, I know I'm missing one of the letters in that acronym. We're in mid-season form here. But the idea is, by the time they get to listen to the show, they will get some help in those late round, making their choices. And anyone out there who is preparing their draft strategy, looking at the bottom of those rosters is an important place. Yes, sometimes you churn through them pretty quick, but when you find those diamonds in the rough that you want to hold on to, that can make the whole difference.
That's right. And the other thing that we are doing tonight is we are live streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/KeepingKarlsson. The hope is that we're going to keep doing this for into the regular season, Louis. That means that our beautiful, I almost said juicy faces. And you know what? That might be a good descriptor for my face. So I'm gonna keep that in there. That's canon now. Is our juicy faces are on screen on twitch.tv/KeepingKarlsson. I hope that more people will join us as we get going. But we already have an all-star crew in the comments here.
Yeah. And one thing, just before we get started, we want to make sure Elon asked us to just remind folks who are in the Cupful. We imagine many of the patrons are listening. Make sure anyone who signed up and is in the $5 all the perks tier to have joined the Discord, that they're added to their league chat, that they are joined in their Fantrax league. And just to reach out to us if you're unsure about anything. Like, we're super friendly, we do not bite. We would like to help you get your team ready to go. This is the largest season of the Cupful ever. We have over 500 managers, closer to 550. And so it's going to be really exciting. 8 tiers, promotion relegation league. This is the biggest and most intensive fantasy hockey league out there. So it's going to be a really outstanding season, and we don't want you to miss out, especially if you are someone who wanted to be part of the fun. So if you're listening and you're in need of some assistance, make sure you jump in the Discord and get some help from us.
Yes. And to add on to that, Elon also mentioned if you were added to your league chat, but you haven't yet joined the Fantrax league yet, please do so ASAP. Elon, you don't want Elon disappointed with you. That is the main thing here. If you've registered but haven't been invited to your league chat, it means that you're either not on Discord or your Patreon is not set up properly. So like Louis said, hop on the Discord, make sure that you have all of the details. And if you have not yet registered for the Cupful, but you still want to play, it's probably not too late. You can still register ASAP, join the wait list. And this says we, but it means Elon and Kevin and Brian and the folks who are running the Cupful will try to get you into a league before drafts begin on September the 19th. And Louis, It's our first chance to talk about our own Cupful leagues. I am not in tier 1 this year. It means my slow draft starts on Monday. I picked 10th overall. I'm curious. I'm putting you on the spot here. Who would you take if you were me, 10th overall in the Cupful?
I wish I was looking at the mock ADPs right now. That seems like a spot where maybe an Ovi is available. Is that like an Ovi Stamkos kind of area?
I'll give you 6 through 10, or 6 through 12. So Kucherov is going at 6, Kaprizov at 7, Marner is averaging at 9, so there's obviously a little bit of overlap there. Rantanen at 10, Ovechkin also averaging around 10, Barkov at 11.
Okay, so I think those higher ranked guys like Kaprizov and Kucherov, I don't know if they're going to be available to you, so I'm not going to spend any time with them. I like Rantanen there if he's available. Marner is kind of low cal because he's not going to give you a whole lot besides those points. I feel like Colorado is going to be a little more top heavy than maybe they typically are, just because it's hard to re-sign all the players they need to and maintain all their depth and that sort of thing. So I kind of like Rantanen to potentially be a lot of value there, maybe carrying even a heavier load than normal. And we know he's capable of a lot of good things.
We also have a couple of people in the chat, Maddie G. That is a shout out my buddy Matty Elliott. Matthew G is in the chat. He's in my division, tier 2 San Jose, drafting at number 5, or rather number 6. Who would you take at 6? Or no, Matthews at 5. I'm getting this mixed up. Who would you take at 5 after the big 4? So presumably 90% of these drafts are going to go McDavid, McKinnon, Draisaitl, Matthews, in some order. Who do you do at 5?
Cale Makar with a bullet, my friend.
Okay. You're going for VORP.
Heck yeah, man. I love to get good defensemen. I know Elon has sometimes talked about maybe fading off of that a little bit, but I really like Makar. I mean, he's doing forward type scoring in that spot. And, I think maybe not as explosive as those other guys, but like he and McKinnon, I have even as kind of close. Like, it was kind of frustrating being a McKinnon owner last year with some injuries being in and out and some stupid decisions that he made. Like, that was not super fun for me. So I'm not saying pick Makar at 4, but at 5, that's what I'm grabbing.
All right. Well, Lewis, let's get into tonight's show. As you mentioned, we are talking about what I thought of this kind of as bargains. So these are guys, not necessarily guys who I think like they need to go earlier, but they're guys who where they're going right now, there's a lot of value there, and guys who could either outperform or who could provide a lot of safe production for you at a point in the draft where it's not very likely that you're going to be able to do so. I dibsed going first, so I am going to begin. And I'm going to start in Buffalo, a team that is, I'd say, this starting to get a little impatient and starting to want a little bit more from one of our favorite coaches, Donnie Meatballs, hoping for maybe being a little bit closer to the playoff picture this year. And I want to talk about Alex Tuch, a player who is going at 165 on Yahoo. And one thing I think we should add here is that Yahoo doesn't appear to have ADP really that goes beyond 160. Everybody is kind of mashed together after 160 or so. So really what that means for Alex Tuch is he's like, on the fringe of being drafted on Yahoo. He's going 153 on Fantrax, which has, I'd say fairly deeper or a fairly deep mock draft
more
system.
Reliable maybe.
Yeah, I think that the numbers are actually real rather than kind of just giving you whenever Tuch is drafted, he's around 160, but often he's not. Before I really talk about Tuch, though, I kind of want to mention quickly here that having done several mocks and kind of to your point about looking at Rantanen at 10, one thing I find when I'm doing the mocks recently on Fantrax and drafting with other dialed in fantasy players is that right wing really seems to thin quickly. At the top of the draft, obviously, you have Kucherov, Rantanen, Pasternak, you got Mitch Marner. I have questions about that next tier, though. And if you look at the Cupful mock ADP, which you can get by becoming a patron and joining the Keeping Karlsson Discord, that gives you essentially, like, I would say the most accurate mock draft ADP that I see between, Fantrax, Yahoo, ESPN. I find this mock ADP put together by Kevin Hebert, the genius of the Cupful, and I find it really helpful in preparation. But if you look at that mock draft from Pasta around 14 and Patrick Kane at 28, so the entirety of the second round, there's really just one right wing going in that stretch, and it's Matthew Tkachuk, who I think it's fair to have some questions there. So my first suggestion here is I just think you need to make sure you're keeping an eye on available right wings and having a plan for how you want to get high-end guys on that side, because I think you may need to take a few swings if you wind up getting like drafting centers and left wings early and needing to fill out that right side. So back to Tuck, this is somebody who's going as, a 12th or 13th round guy. If you're looking at 12 team mocks, who's going to be playing on a top power play on a potentially bubble-ish Buffalo team. And, he did come in and pace for around 60 points last year after coming back from an injury, after getting traded over from Vegas. And this season, he's coming in healthy. He's coming in with a full training camp under his belt. And I think there's a chance he can outpace the 60 points he scored last year. But I also think that even if he doesn't, he's still going to be really valuable. He's going to provide you multi-cat coverage. He's going to be a solid contributor. It's a safe play, and I don't always love safe plays at this point in the draft, but I feel like Alex Tuch is a guy who a lot of people are going to get him in the second half of their drafts, and he's going to be more valuable than a few of the players that you pick up before that. So really nice, safe floor play, but Alex Tuch is somebody who I really like in drafts this year.
Yeah, I like that too. I don't want to spend forever and a day on each player that we cover, but I think that we're talking about Buffalo as a team that has a lot of young talent that's developing. I think that we can assume that they take some steps forward, that they're, getting towards more of a winning mentality. A lot of that is, some hopey, changey kind of thinking, but I think there is something to be said to, having that talent get some time to develop, and Tuch, having access now to more playing time and better line mates than he ever got in Vegas. And I think that's an exciting opportunity for him. And you brought up all the work that Kevin is doing. As long as we're talking about the great stuff in the Cupful, there is not a league that you're going to be able to join that has more comprehensive stats brought to you in real time than the Cupful. So that's another really cool thing that it offers. We'd love to have you there. Ultimately, it kind of looked like once we divvied up who we wanted to look at, not intentionally necessarily, but you were kind of looking at guys between 150 and 200. And I ended up looking at a lot of guys from 200 down to the 230s or so. So, basically, as it bounces back between you and I, you're looking at some guys who might be available at the end of drafts in shallower leagues. My guys will be available in, at the end rounds in drafts that are a little deeper. And I want to look at Mikael Granlund as an option. He's going at 196 in Fantrax, around 205 in Cupful ADP. 64 points last year, including 53 assists. Pretty nice totals for him. Obviously, Nashville was a team that really broke out and finally figured out that power play. It had really been their bugaboo, was not having any sense of how to get that power play to work. Certainly helped that Philly Forsberg was in a contract year. I have to imagine that worked out very nice for him. Good on Nashville for being able to keep him around. 205 in the Cupful ADP, that's about as low as you can go to find a line one power play one center who isn't a rookie, injured, or flying some big red flags. There should be some red flags. That's why he's being drafted, in the 200s. I don't think we can count on Nashville to be as successful on the power play. I think Yossi, Duchesne, and Forsberg all overperformed. We saw nearly 19% shooting from Granlund's line mates, and that helped him get 25 power play assists. So I don't know if 28 power play points is necessarily in the cards for him again. And we know he doesn't shoot a ton, but this is a guy who will give you a hit per game. He's very likely to reprise his role as center between Duchesne and Forsberg. He seems like a very safe 55 to 60 point guy. And that's pretty, I think that's solid value for a guy around pick 200 to be confident that you're getting 55 points at a minimum.
Yeah, I wish that I could be as excited about Granlund, but you kind of said it right at the end there about the shots. And that's what really bothers me about this guy. Yeah, in a points only league, I agree with you completely. But I just worry about a guy who doesn't hit 2 shots a game with 20 minutes a night on the ice. And yeah, I think the power play points is the other thing there. I am worried about that coming back to earth. But hey, at 205 or two in the final round of the Cupful draft, that's where you're kind of taking your shot and you're seeing what you can do. And definitely Granlund, a guy who can be a streamer type as well, right? Like you can add him for that power play. Actually with Nashville having that back-to-back early on in the season, Granlund is a really interesting option as a streamer type that you can draft and then drop after that, after those international games against, is it San Jose? Am I right about that?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. I agree with you now. I'm on board.
I love it. So I was going to bounce back to that talking about the schedule, but we are vibing. You are right there with me.
You said it. We're in mid-season form here. Am I up next?
Yeah.
Or did you have, okay. I want to talk about Sean Couturier next. And I think he's a bit of an obvious candidate here. He's going in that 160 range that I mentioned earlier as sort of like where the average spot kind of flattens out. And I think Couturier has always kind of been a sleeper type who doesn't really get the respect he deserves in fantasy. At this point, obviously, I have some, I think, fairly predictable concerns about him. The Flyers look like they might be like bad. But despite that very bleak outlook, obviously the unquestioned 1C in Philly, and he's going so low that he's basically free, especially in Yahoo. That's what gets me excited here, is if you're in sort of one of those leagues that, you're drafting with a couple of buddies from back home and, you're one of like 4 or 5 people who know what you're doing. I think that Couturier could wind up being one of those guys who's free money this year. Tortorella's coming in to coach this team. He's going to be looking to wring offensive blood out of the Philadelphia stone. I'd expect it to be Couturier who's a part of it. And he's the highest upside of anyone on this Philly team. There's no question for me there. But a bonus name that I wanted to kind of throw out there, this is my boldest pivot that I'm going to get into maybe on this show, is if you think about John Tortorella and the way that he coaches and the way that he's obsessed with defensive responsibility, Sean Couturier, that's who Sean Couturier was for years. And we knew that he could do more. We thought that given more opportunity in Philadelphia, he could become an offensive forward. And he did that, right? Like over the last 3-4 years, he turned into that 70-point guy. But I can't help but think there's a chance. This is a bold prediction. This is a chance.
Spit it out, man. I want to hear it.
Tortorella could wind up loving Couturier's defensive upside so much that he needs the second line to be that scoring line. And if that's the case, I mean, I'm not going to draft anyone on that second line off top, but is Kevin Hayes potentially interesting in that situation? Yes. So I'm looking forward to Flyers training camp. I think I'm the first person to say that this year. And it's because I want to see what's going on with the Flyers lines. I feel like there's an opportunity for Kevin Hayes if they need to find offense on the second line, because Couturier is, too busy being the Jon Snow fighting off a whole army on the top line.
Do we know what Kevin Hayes' Cupful ADP is? Is it undefined?
I think he is undrafted across all mocks. So yes, I'm not saying draft him, but I am saying.
So we were talking about a diamond in the deepest of the rough, but that's a really interesting idea, actually, that, I think a lot of people come in and think, okay, Sean Couturier, defensively responsible. Torts is going to love him in much the same way that he is going to dog Tony DeAngelo. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that love actually comes all the way around to the point where Couturier is taking on too much defensive responsibility, that it's not helping his offensive game the way that you might imagine, getting out there with some extra time is. And yeah, maybe keep an eye out for that Kevin Hayes. We're gonna store that one away, because if Kevin Hayes goes off on a little bender, we're all going to be talking about how wise Ben Burnett is.
That is the key, is you have to make just absolutely ludicrous calls once a show, and then when one of them hits, that's the only one you ever talk about again.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's jump back down to some of the later round guys. We're going to talk about a guy who's right around where Mikael Granlund was. He's actually a little later in Fantrax ADP and a little earlier in Cupful, 3 later and 3 earlier, so kind of in the exact same spot, and that's Philip Grubauer. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this one, because this is, I think, my most dangerous selection here, because you're dealing with a goalie who just was straight up god awful. Like, he did worse, significantly worse than an average goalie should have done in his position. But it's also, it's hard to imagine that with the variability of goalies, I'm hoping that he has been as bad as he was likely to be, on this brand new team that was still feeling things out. They're better down the middle post draft. They're in year 2 of their building plan. And honestly, at 202, this is not a very expensive choice for you to make. I can't imagine he's going to go for more than $1 or $2 in the auction. It's a guy that you can dump if he doesn't work out, but he could potentially, if he can, be average, he could provide you a lot of value from where he's being drafted. There's just a lot of negativity about how horrendous his play was. And just, Seattle was kind of rough, I think. And yes, we can say better down the middle, but we're talking about a couple of rookies, but at least they're speedy guys. They have the potential to be able to come back and help in the defensive end. I'm kind of into the rise of Gru this upcoming season.
That despicable you, my friend. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. When you said that you didn't want to, you weren't going to, this is your riskiest pick. I love this pick. I think that Philipp Grubauer, you know what? I'm just going to hop right into my next pick. And that's going to be, I'm going to jump down my list a bit to Jared McCann here. And I think of Jared McCann sort of in the prototype of a post-hype sleeper. And that's what I think Grubauer can be as well. Not that I expect him to be maybe as good as we thought he could be last year, going into last year rather. But these are guys who are on a team that unquestionably just added pieces to the top that allow their rest of their lines to sort of fit into more acceptable positions for them. So, McCann was a guy who was getting a ton of hype as maybe the next Jonathan Marchessault on the expansion Kraken. And when you look around this lineup, I feel like there's an opportunity for some of these guys to make that jump this year. You talked about some of the players that get added here. We're talking about Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand. Hopefully, Matty Beniers can be the guy who a lot of people hope that. And what we saw from him at the end of last year was really exciting, and that could be really, really beneficial to Jared McCann on the power play. As I also mentioned, it's going to allow him to fit into the lineup a little bit easier. I've seen a few line combos that have put him on the wing, allowing him to sort of play with a little bit less responsibility and maybe become a bit more freewheeling. But if you look at McCann's numbers, despite the fact that he didn't really pan out at the level that people had hoped for, he started firing the puck at the net at a much higher rate than we're used to seeing from him. I think he jumped from 2.2 to 2.7 shots per game. And that makes him rosterable in basically any league, in my opinion. In any categories league that counts shots is what I meant to say there. Any multi-cat league. But he's also really useful in a points leagues. In the Cupful, if he's going to shoot 2.5 shots per game, then he's giving you a couple of points just there as a baseline. And then if he's adding a point every 1.5 games or so, if he's only going to become a 60-point player, that's still fine because the shots are there. So again, a player who you're going to get very late in drafts, but I think one who has a lot more upside than people are realizing because they feel a bit burned by him last year.
Yeah. And, I have a soft spot for Jared McCann. I was hoping for big things for him. I really like the idea of not seeing him kind of shoehorned into a center role, but getting that freedom you were talking about on the wing. At the risk of reusing a joke, Seattle was kind of like a Spirit Airlines team last year. They got some wings and they got a whole lot of nothing down the middle in terms of, what they can provide for the people in the seats. So, I really like that idea. Can I jump on to my next guy? All right. So up next, I want to talk about another guy. This is kind of a big jump after this one, but Gustav Forsling, who Fantrax and Cupful are right about in agreement with. 207 on Fantrax, 208 in Cupful. With this big minute muncher, Mackenzie Weegar off to Calgary in the Tkachuk trade. G-Force, which is what we are calling him now, 100%. Looks to inherit some additional minutes that I don't think Mark Stahl and the ghost of Michael Del Zotto are going to be able to take on. They added a couple guys, but none that are looking like the type of guys who can handle the type of minutes that Weegar was running for the team. He didn't get any power play time on ice, even after Ekblad was injured, talking about Forsling again. But Brandon Montour, who was doing the power play fill-in, didn't get any power play points. So there's a possibility they can give him the chance. But even if he stays off the power play, and I know this was the guy you talked to David Dwork about in your outstanding series, your 32 beats, the interviews that you and Elon have been doing. Look at him as, a guy who can fill peripherals. If he's going to be filling in some of those weak arm minutes, that's going to be even more minutes to gather up those peripheral stats if your league counts them. Dauber projects him at about a 50-point pace, and I think that's reasonable. And he's got room to go over that if he can get onto power play too, when they're spelling Ekblad and that top unit.
I agree with you on this one. I love Gustav Forsling as your fourth defenseman in a league. I think he has an opportunity to really outshine that value. It's kind of interesting, thinking through, when you're taking swings at the end of a draft, when you're drafting a forward late, you're really hoping for them to be able to put up points. But when you're picking defensemen at the end of the draft, in a lot of cases, you're really just looking to find eke out this very marginal value. And I feel like that's what you can find with Gustav Forsling, is a player who was pretty decent last year, but now with a slight uptick in minutes, a little bit more opportunity to rack up those peripheral stats, could turn into a guy who's worth rostering in a lot more leagues.
I definitely like that as a strategy, aiming for the ceiling with forwards at the end of your draft and looking for a steady floor from defensemen towards the end of that draft, especially because, there's not going to be nearly as many surprises. I think there's always a couple, coming up through the ranks, or there's injuries and that sort of thing, but look for floor for your late draft defenseman.
I'm going to go to a player that I'm drafting for ceiling, and that's Seth Jarvis, who's going around 170 on Yahoo, 177 on Fantrax. A guy who really turned it on in the second half last year. I don't think I'm really alone I know I'm not alone in projecting an uptick for Jarvis, but I just think the case is so strong here. He puts up 18 points in the last 21 games of the regular season, playing almost entirely with Sebastian Aho. And even though Rob Brind'Amour is a big time line blender offender, it was very irregular that Jarvis would get blendered off that top line. Usually he would stay there when Teuvo was there, and he would stay there when Svech was there. I think what's really interesting about Jarvis heading into next season, though, is you hear people talk about what the top power play will look like in Carolina. Obviously, if Pacioretty were healthy, he would factor in there, but where he's not going to be back for quite a while. We're looking at Aho, we're looking at Teuvo. We're looking at Brent Burns, of course. And I think that most people expect Svechnikov, and then it's a bit of a question mark as to who is the fourth. What many people, I think, are forgetting about the playoffs last season is that Andrei Svechnikov was not on the top power play unit at the end of the regular season and into the playoffs. It was Seth Jarvis's spot. And when Jarvis got hurt, they once again did not put Andrei Svechnikov on the top unit. They gave it to Martin Necas, sorry. So do I think Svechnikov, doesn't get onto the top power play at any point this season? No, that would be silly. And if Rob Brind'Amour does that, I will be angry with him. But to me, when I look at Jarvis, this guy who posts a 50-point pace as a 19-year-old, going into his second full season with a coach who seems to love putting him in positions to succeed. Necas was a guy who had a lot of hype, but who the Canes management and coaching staff seems to be fairly disappointed with. Jarvis seems to be the guy who's going to be in a position to succeed. I think there's a really solid chance for a breakout here. And I think he probably still remains a streamer in shallow leagues, but I think he's a great target in deeper leagues. And I think he has the talent to put up, 65 points next year, depending on that opportunity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a guy who was not really on my radar at all. So I love to hear you bring him up and provide us with some of that info about how he's being deployed. Really interesting and could be a great guy, and that lets me segue also to another player who it seems like his coach really enjoys putting him in a position where he can succeed. And that's Trevor Moore. And now, we're not talking about power play one type position to succeed, but we're also talking about a guy who's going 222 overall in Fantrax and 226 overall in Cacupful. So, this is a big drop from Forsling. We've gone down about a full round worth of picks. to get down to Trevor Moore. But this is a guy who I think is really interesting. If you're in a deep draft and he's still hanging around at the tail end, Trevor Moore was a guy who forced himself onto line 2 around midseason ahead of the more experienced Alex Iafallo and just really refused to take a step back. He had 23 points in 22 games in January and February. And though he slowed down, he only had 18 and 27 in March and April. He really was a delight for fantasy owners, especially those who counted shots and shorthanded points. He had 4 shorties and a shorthanded assist during March and April, bringing his total to 6 shorthanded points on the season, which tied him for first with Alex Formenton. I decided I would not quiz you on that one because that seems like a tough one. But he was ahead of players like Barkov, Huberdeau, Zibanejad in shorthanded points. This is a spot where he can succeed in, and there are a lot of leagues that reward those shorthanded points. So that could be interesting. If you have him as a category, getting 1 or 2 is enough to win you the week. Or if you get some bonus points for him, that's always really nice. I don't think he's going to score 65 points like the pace he put up over the last 65 odd games of the season. But I think that he's another guy who could be, a 55 point guy potentially on that second line and could provide you, with a nice pile of shots. He had 202 shots last season. He only shot 8%. So it's not like his numbers, his shooting numbers were way too high. And like I said, great pick for anyone who counts shots and shorthanded points, either as categories or rewards them with points.
Yeah, it's weird to me that there's absolutely zero Trevor Moore hype, not because he's super flashy and exciting, but just that he was so good over the second half that it feels like there's always somebody who wants to continue and buy into the second half excitement. And to me, Trevor Moore is somebody who, at the very least, I'm curious to see what he can do this year, following up last year. I am going to jump to a goaltender. I have 2 left here, Lewis. How about you?
I also have 2, and they're kind of a theme. So I'll do them together after you do your next guy.
Okay, then I think I'm going to finish up here. I think this will be my last one.
Okay.
And I have a goalie. And this is a goalie who they're going 118 on Yahoo and 180 on Fantrax. So this is more for the Fantrax girlies that are listening. I'm talking about Logan Thompson in Vegas. I did not realize how high he was going on Yahoo. He's ahead of Jordan Binnington and way ahead of Elvis Merzlikins. That's way too high for me. I am not that type of into Logan Thompson. I'm not going to grab him in Yahoo drafts this year. Definitely. Assume if you're drafting for Yahoo, and again, in a situation where you're drafting with your home league, just fill in Elvis for this slot. You should be drafting him way higher than where he's going. But if you're drafting in a league of cognizant fantasy players, then I really think that Logan Thompson has just really, really the potential to be a very good pick at this slot. As a prospect, you look through his stats: elite in the AHL, elite in the ECHL, elite in college. And then when he joined the Flailing Knights amid horrific injury luck last year, he posts this really solid .914 save percentage. I have a stat here too, Lewis. That save percentage is tied with everybody's favorite goalie of all time, Jake Ettinger. So you're high on Jake Ettinger. It's because he has the net there. I'm obviously going to bet on Jake Ettinger over Logan Thompson because I believe in Ettinger getting more of the starts. And I think that Brian and Elon put Logan Thompson in tier 1 million or whatever on Smart Goalies board for a reason. And that's that there are question marks with him, but I'm not here to say that he's going to blow people away this season. My take on goalies has always been the same. It's that I want opportunity for cheap. And that's what Logan Thompson represents to me. Talent is not as important to me as deployment. And I'm okay with a little risk so long as there is a lot of reward. Logan Thompson right now is being drafted as a low end number 2 who has no one in the way, nobody good in the way of becoming a workhorse on a potential cup contender. And if you do end up with Logan Thompson and he does stink, I'm thinking similarly to was it Michael Hutchinson who stunk in that everybody thought would be good in Winnipeg? And no,
Winnipeg.
He
wasn't Winnipeg.
Yeah, but it was I
don't know if anyone thought he was going to.
Was it Steve Mason who was supposed to be good, and then he blew it in Winnipeg, and that's when Connor Hellebuck came out? I think that's what it was, right? They signed Steve Mason, he blew it immediately, and if you had Steve Mason, you just had to handcuff Connor Hellebuck and you got a top 10 goalie with your last pick in the draft. And I think that that's similar to the situation that you could have with Logan Thompson. You grab Logan Thompson, has the potential to be a workhorse on a potential cup contender. And if he doesn't play well to start the year, you grab Aiden Hill or whatever. Ride the wave. I'm super into this risk on Thompson, and you let those chips fall as they may.
I hope we can get confirmation for that Steve Mason trivia from known friend and trusted Steve Mason agent Brian in the Twitch chat. I guess the one thing that I think is concerning people about Thompson is, isn't he on a 2-way contract?
Yeah, but there's only 2 of the goalies in the. Laurent Brossoit is not going to be ready to go to start the season. He's going to have his opportunity. He's been better than Brossoit last year. I like him.
Yeah, I was going to say, even despite the potential that he could be sent down, I think there is a very good chance that he plays his way into keeping that position. I think that's a really interesting lottery ticket pick for a goalie.
If nothing else, Lewis, does that not make him even more like Jake Ettinger?
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. That's like the parallels are this is eerie.
Yeah, exactly. So lock it in. Jake Ettinger is going to win or almost win Las Vegas a playoff series this year.
Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, let's be serious. That dude did everything he could. All right. The last 2 guys that I want to talk about are kind of peas in a pod here, because they are both guys that I think have temporary value because they're filling in for guys who are injured. We're not exactly sure how soon their normal, the guys who normally fill those positions will be back. But I want to talk about Jake DeBrusk and Dylan Strome. DeBrusk potentially filling in during the Marchand absence. He's rescinded his trade request. He seems to be a lot happier with Cassidy gone. So he could be a guy who, has the potential. We'll talk about him in a second. And then Dylan Strome was my other guy who might be filling in that second center position in Washington with Backstrom out. So starting with JDB, he's going 229 in Cupful, or in Fantrax, 231 in Cupful. Could see that top line and potentially power play one time until Marchand gets back. It could only be a handful of your weekly matches. But again, at the price that he's going, that's a nice piece to have. And this is a spot that you probably want to churn into a streamer slot eventually anyway. So, ride it while it's hot, buy that short-term ticket like you were talking about. And if it doesn't work out, no skin off your back, right? You can move on to someone else. He's definitely not going to be a permanent solution there. But he did finish 2022 with 12 points in 15 April games, and he saw his time on ice rise 2 minutes during that run. So I do worry a little bit that the Bruins power play could be rickety with no Marchand or McAvoy out of the gate. But yeah, this is a guy who could provide you some temporary above replacement value from a spot that, really has no real value, at the way tail end of your draft. And then another guy who has kind of an interesting discrepancy, just said Dylan Strome. He's going 238 in Fantrax, but way up at 217. So ahead of Jake DeBrusk by a full round. And, with Backstrom facing that lengthy recovery, according to the team, Strome gets that second center duty, could potentially see top power play if Mantha continues his descent down the lineup that he seems to love to take. And the coaches maybe decide to move on from that power play one Connor Sherry experience. Strome showed us some things towards the end of the season there. Probably safer bet that he ends up on power play too, but he could still, he would still have Oshie and Mantha flanking him at even strength. And he finished with 27 points in 28 games in March and April last year. So I think that at least makes him intriguing. And certainly it seems like the Cupful drafters have time for Dylan Strome towards the end of their drafts as well. So that might be a guy who might see himself in a plum spot, at least to start the year.
I do want to say I'm really into Jake DeBrusk, where he's going as well. I think that's a very fun lottery ticket, especially to start the year. Dylan Strome, my question for you there is, would you rather Dylan Strome or would you rather Connor Brown?
Ooh, that is a really interesting one.
Because the thing with Connor Brown, right, is that he might be line 1 filling in for Tom Wilson, which is a much better position than line 2 on this squad.
Do you know off the top of your head what his ADP is?
Yes, it is. It's slightly ahead. It's like 260, I want to say.
That's 260 is lower.
253, and Dylan Strome is 272 or 280, right? Am I wrong?
I have him at 238 on Fantrax and 217 on Cupful.
Yes. Oh, 217.
So if that's where Strome is going compared to Brown, obviously wait and see what the practice news is. But if Brown is up on line one, I think Brown might potentially be the more talented guy than Strome. I think Strome maybe is starting to show us what we've seen from him. I think that is a really interesting one. And now I wish I had thought to put him on my list, but I wanted to pair these guys because I was thinking about some temporary replacements that you can turn into a streaming slot later. So it's an interesting one for sure. That's a good point. I really like it. This is why you're up there among the best of our podcasters.
All right, Lewis. We are drifting into, I'd say we're firmly into medium shift territory. We're very close to long shift territory. And so I think it's time for us to pop off. I want to thank the folks who joined us for tonight's live stream. Please, everybody who's listening and wants to hang out with us, join us at twitch.tv/Keeping Karlsson. I'm sure we'll announce the next time we go live. For myself, Ben Burnett, thank you so much for joining us. Lewis, take us on out of here.
Thanks for joining us so much, especially if you joined us on the Twitch stream. Be sure to give us a follow at ShortChipsKK, Brian and Elon at Keeping Karlsson, Dave Betton of Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. Definitely recommend that you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News. Please visit the great sites we research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Trick, and Cupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.
Bye.